The live stream is currently loading. And the live stream has started.
Okay, thanks, Emily. All right, well, welcome folks to the Puget Sound Energy Public Webinar. Today, we will be getting started in a couple minutes, so please just sit tight and we'll kick off at 12. Thanks for being here. And hi, folks. I just wanted to note before we get started that if you would like closed captions translated into another language, please go to the bottom of your bar and it will say show captions. And you can click on the arrow. And what you can do is click on what your speaking language is. So if that's Spanish, French, Cantonese, what have you, go ahead and select that. And then you can click which captions you would prefer your language to be in and have those captions show up on your screen, and they should translate for you. And I realize I'm speaking in English, so if anyone from the PSE team is able to speak Spanish fluently and provide those instructions, please feel free to chime in.
Annie, I don't think we have that, but I am going to see if I can add an image to the chat that just points to that translation feature or captions feature.
Sounds good, Ray. I do have a translator too on my phone. I don't know how well it will do this, but I can try to at least put that in there.
I'm going to ask Jack, who's sharing the screen. Jack, if you're able to share the image I just sent you, maybe that would help.
Absolutely. Let me pull that up.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Thanks, Virginia. Okay, well, we are right at 12:02, so we'll go ahead and get started. And it's good to know that some people do use those language translation captions. Just a reminder, if others have folks that they know that would want to participate, if this was offered in another language, it's always good feedback for us to hear. But for now, what I'm going to do is go ahead and welcome folks. And just so you know, Jack, it looks like your screen sharing has paused, which is okay. I'm just welcoming people, but I'm going to go ahead and start. My name is Annie Kilberg-Smith. I work with a company called Triangle Associates, and we do facilitation and public involvement. So I'm going to be here helping to facilitate today's conversation for this public webinar hosted by Puget Sound Energy. And whether you're here to ask questions or learn or just stay informed, we're really glad that you made the time in this beautiful sunny afternoon to be with us today. And just so you know, today's conversation is part of a bigger effort to plan for clean energy as a whole into the future. And so your participation really helps shape that with Puget Sound Energy. And we'll be using PSE for Puget Sound Energy throughout today. And we'll try to make sure we say out loud what acronyms mean what throughout today, so folks don't get lost on what those are. I know that can be confusing. Okay, next slide. Okay, so before we dive in, just a quick tech check. You're going to see your Zoom controls at the bottom or the top of your screen, depending on which device you're on. And then you can find closed captions right there on the very far right in multiple languages. If you click show captions to see the real-time captioning multiple languages, select whatever your speaking language is, and then select the translation language. They should show up on your screen as folks are speaking. Just note that there are a lot of technical terms. So if you are using those translation services, sometimes things don't perfectly translate 100%. We're going to be focusing most of our time on using the question and answer tool. So you see that Q&A pod with the two question bubbles right there. We want you to direct all your questions into that space. We also have a chat space for folks, but we really want to reserve that for conversation and for some waterfall responses that we're going to be asking from you all today, and to answer any technical things that come up. So if you have a question for our presenters today, please go ahead and put it in that Q&A pod. And then, of course, you are welcome to use the emojis whenever you want to react. We love seeing those. And just a reminder, today is a webinar format, so you're not going to see each other in terms of other attendees. But panelists will be responding to your questions as they pop into the pod. And if we don't get to your question today, it'll be included in a follow-up webinar recap. Okay, next slide. So a few quick notes to help us have a smooth session. We want to just ask you to keep your questions focused on today's topic so we can stay on track. PSE will, of course, do their best to answer those questions, like I said, that as many as we can live, and then we'll address any in the follow-up recap if we need to. And then if you think of something after the session, you're always welcome to reach out using the feedback form or the email address listed up on the screen. And Emily, my colleague from Triangle, will pop those into the chat if you need links to those. And want to just thank you in advance for keeping our conversations constructive and focused. We really value having you all here today. All right, next slide. So next thing up, we have a quick safety moment. So wildfire season is actually already here, and we want to just make sure that you and your household are prepared if it comes close to you, which we hope it doesn't. But make sure you build an emergency kit and make a plan with your family. Please keep PSE account and info on up to date in case of any outages that you need to be relying on. If you do rely on electricity for medical devices, be sure to apply for the life support status on your PSE account. And for an easy step, you can get your free wildfire ready plan from the Washington Department of Natural Resources. It's quick and helpful. And we're dropping a bunch of those links into the chat for you from Emily, so you can go find those online. All right, next slide. So this is today's team. You're going to be hearing from Brian Tyson, Manager of Clean Energy Planning and Implementation at PSE, and Ray Outlaw, Manager of Communications Initiatives at PSE. And I'll be guiding us through the conversation. So thanks to Brian and Ray for being here to help us out and walk us through all this important information, answer questions. And I know it's really important for them that you are all here too, so that they can get to know you and hear what is top of your mind. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Okay, so here's what we're going to be doing in the next hour. We're going to start with a refresher on how we got to this point in the planning process. Then we're going to walk through how electricity is generated today, what PSE is forecasting for future energy needs, and then how all of this ties into the 2027 integrated system plan. We're going to, of course, use time throughout the meeting today and at the end for questions to wrap up. And if you're watching while eating your lunch, please feel free to stay comfy and listen in. and take yourself off, or sorry, go ahead and type your questions into the chat as needed, but we want you to be comfortable. We're just glad to have you here. Next slide. Okay. So how did we get here? So Brian's going to introduce this to all of us. And so I'll hand it over to Brian to get us kicked off.
Annie, can I pause this just for a minute? We have a screenshot to show just to help folks that are navigating to the translated captions.
Yeah. That sounds great. Okay, let's see. It's hard to see. Can you zoom in, Jack? Quite a bit.
Yeah, it gets a little blurry the more I
Oh,
zoom,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
you select my speaking language and then select from this bar.
Okay. So those arrows point to where you go to the closed captions on your screen. And then you should be able to select my speaking language, Spanish, and then translate captions into English. And then the caption should pop up on your screen in in Spanish. Okay. Great. Hopefully we can resolve that. And if not, I can also try to work just through direct messaging with Noralis. Okay, great. Well, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Brian to kick us off.
Okay, thanks, Annie. Thanks, Ray. Hopefully everyone's able to get closed caption or be able to listen in on the presentation today. Really appreciate everyone being here. As Annie mentioned, we're going to go through a couple of slides here to really talk about some of our future clean energy needs. I'm going to start with a refresher, as Annie mentioned, but as we get through the slides, one of the things we want to do is we want to take some time and hear from you all. So we really want to understand what are your preferences for some of the resources we're thinking about studying that are going to help power that clean energy future. So I hope you'll keep that top of mind as we move through this presentation. But let's start, like Annie said, with a refresher. So if we can go to the next slide. We've had a number of conversations here with you all and others from our customers where we started to talk about the beginning stages of the integrated system plan. Back in November, we really started thinking about the sort of concepts of how do we build an integrated system plan? How do you combine really the electric analysis and the gas analysis together into one cohesive plan? Because that's ideally what we're trying to do at the end of the day here. So back then in November rather, we really started to think about this first of its kind, really groundbreaking plan that we're trying to put together. And then in March, we introduced the concept of scenario planning. Now, you all may remember I walk through different scenarios related to back to school shopping and really trying to understand what is the right mix of clothing in order to go back to school shopping. And so we walk through different scenarios because that's a similar approach of how we're taking to get to the final integrated system plan. We're trying to understand those different possible futures, those different scenarios so that we can build the best plan moving forward. A more realistic future, I should say. Now, today, we really want to focus in on the types of resources, the kinds of resources that could power this clean energy future. In October, we're going to talk more about the customer side of those aspects. We'll tee it up a little here, but today we're really focused on those large scale, utility scale resources to help power that clean energy future. All right, so if we can go to the next slide. And in this first grouping, I really want to talk about where we're at today. So next slide, please. When we think about the energy resources, especially the large scale energy resources that are out there, we really want to think about it in sort of these three buckets. In these three buckets, each bucket has its own purpose and function. And so we want to recognize what is that function, what is that purpose, and then we want to recognize, well, what are the resources that make up each of these different buckets that we have here. So under the base load, we think about generation that is always available most of the time. It's really that just stable foundation of energy that we have serving customers. You see some examples there of what we sort of have in our existing mix today between hydro and some nuclear and other fossil fuel generation resources as well. Then we think about resources that we need when energy is really high, rather demand is really high. We could think about some of those warm days like we've had recently where it was 80 degrees and up in the Puget Sound area, or some of those really cold days that we sometimes get in the winter time as well. So those are those times of the year where we need some of the peaking resources, which are the resources we turn on to be able to again uh, meet our demand from customers when it's those really hot days or those cold wintry days as well. And so we can think about some of the natural gas peaker plants that we have, or even some of the battery storage that may come about later on as well. Then we think about intermittent resources, and these are resources that, depending on the certain conditions, depending on weather, they are there to really complement those baseload and peaking resources. So we think about the variability of wind and solar, even some hydro, depending on conditions. That's where those come into play and can really help still provide that reliable energy that we're focused on providing to our customers. All right, so let's go to the next slide. So that just gives us the scope of the resources themselves. This now gives us a overall view of the mix of resources that we have in our portfolio. Now, this picture I will say is from 2023, but today it's really close. We have close to half of our energy that we use to serve our customers comes from hydro, wind. Solar is a smaller chunk in that other bucket there. But then we also have another less than half that is uh, energy is coming from either fossil fuel resources like natural gas and coal, and there's others out there as well. So this just really gives you insight to where the mix sits today, because later on we're going to talk about where the mix needs to go and some of the resources we could use to help build out that mix. Okay, let's go
Okay.
to the next slide. Might be questioned actually.
Is it okay if we pause for, or do you want to go ahead and, yeah,
Oh,
perfect.
no, it's
Okay,
questions. So, okay. All right.
great. Okay. Yeah, I see there's a question from Dawn that says it's not visible in the usual place for me. Where do I find it? I'm not sure if I know what that's referring to. Solar
It's
plus,
the attendee count, Annie.
oh, attendee count. Okay. Yeah, we can, I don't know if it shouldn't be showing up. It should be showing up for you. Right now, it looks like there's 42 attendees online and 9 panelists. So yeah, so I answered that one. So hopefully that helps. I don't know exactly where it should be showing up for you. It's showing up in the usual place on our end right now. Okay, I'll keep us going with some more of the substantive questions. So solar and storage can be base load. If you doubt it, check out okay, great, good to know. Okay, and then from Francis, under which category does maintenance fall?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Francis. I think what I think the question is about, how do we consider maintenance of these resources as we do our resource planning? And if that is the question, we consider the maintenance costs of each of the resources as we do our full planning for the portfolio. So we understand what is the cost for our wind, what's the cost for our natural gas, what's the cost for hydro. We understand those costs, and those are part of the modeling that we put um, uh, under each of those resources there. So hopefully, Francis, that covers what the question you're asking there.
Thank you. Okay. And then from Rosemary, I thought we were ending our dependence on coal.
Yeah, thanks for that, Rosemary. Yeah, you're getting ahead of our next few slides here, but you're absolutely correct. By the end of 2025, we cannot serve our customers with coal resources, so we will be shifting out of coal resources by the end of this year. And so we're really looking at what happens after that. How do we bring in resources to really continue to serve our customers reliably with other resources, other emerging technologies that are out there?
Thanks, Brian. Okay, and then one more here.
Mhm.
Do you see biodiesel in your future?
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think that was from Michael. Yeah, thanks for that question, Michael. That's one of the sort of emerging technologies that we're looking at as well. And we've got a slide later on where we'll touch on some of the different emerging technologies and different conversion that we're looking at. But yes, biodiesel is something that we are considering and monitoring in this process.
Great. Thanks, Brian. And those are the only questions for now. So I think we can just keep moving here.
Okay. All right, let's go to the next slide then, and we're going to talk a bit about some of the challenges impacting our mix of resources. And it'll touch on some of the questions from Rosemary and Michael and others as we go through these next few slides. So let's go to the next slide. So this chart you all may be familiar with, but it really, the point we wanted to emphasize here is that our lows are increasing significantly. And what's driving that increase is a number of factors. A few of them we point out here, which are population growth, some of the EV demand, and also demand for commercial and residential cooling. We get this question a lot, but we are monitoring data centers and how that impacts our service area. We're not seeing a significant driver in our service area today. But like I said, as those inquiries may increase, we'll continue to monitor that as it will impact directly here our electric load here. But the point I wanted to emphasize here is that we are showing a really large load growth, especially over the next 20 years. And so that's something that we need to prepare for and be thinking about as we make this clean energy transition. So let's go to the next slide because this goes back to the pie chart I showed earlier. So earlier, if you recall, I showed the chart of what the mix sort of looks like today. And you can still see that the slices of the wind and the hydro there. But what I want to call out are two areas. One is the retirement of fossil fuels. So we know that, as Rosemary had called out, by the end of 2025, we need to move out of coal, right? And that's part of that hashed area you see there. By the end of 2045, we need to retire all of our fossil fossil fuels, move away from all of our fossil fuels. So that's where that full hash is encompassed there. Um, in the previous slide, I talked about new demand that's going to come about that's really going to sort of add another slice that we have to think about what resources are we going to use to fill in that new demand. And we also know that hydroelectric is really dependent on the climate and the weather, and the same for wind and solar that can be really variable, that may not produce the same energy over time. And so we call this out and we have this picture here so that we really show that we've got to figure out a way to fill in for the resources that are leaving, to fill in for the resources that are variable, and to also fill in for the increase in demand that we're going to see over time. And so what we're hoping to explain today is some of the technologies, some of the areas where we can bring in new resources to really help fill in so that we can continue to provide reliable power, energy rather, to our customers here. All right. All right, let's go to the next slide because there's a couple of other challenges we really wanted to tease out here. Um, the first I want to call out is on the transmission aspect because you'll see in a slide later, we'll talk about all the different resources that we're planning to model and to analyze, but also thinking about practically and feasibly where are they located in our service territory. So all of them will not be and may not be in Western Washington. So we have to think about how do we get energy from different parts of our service area, different parts of the region rather, back here, and what are the challenges, whether it be permitting or any of the other challenges that we see with transmission. Another really key challenge is cost. We know that as we make this transition, we have to be mindful of the impacts to customers, impacts to you on your bills as we make these types of investments. So whether it be bringing in new transmission lines or new resources, whether they be wind, solar, whatever type of resource they may be, they're going to have an impact on customer bills. And so we have to be mindful of what we study and how we study those different areas. We also want to call out the customer side. And I mentioned this earlier that we'll talk more about the customer side in our October webinar, but the customer programs that we have currently and will have in the future also play a role in this as well. But that's an area where we have to continue to work hand in hand and partner with customers to understand what are the type of customer products and programs that you want to see, how do those get integrated into the full mix, and how do they get used into the full grid, the full system as well. And at the end of the day, as we walk through these different challenges, we're always working to ensure that safety and reliability is a part of this transition. That is really the cornerstone of all of these different things that we're going to do and talk about today here. Now, we know that as we phase out some of these carbon emitting generation, we're going to need new technology to fill that gap. And so in the next couple slides, I'll talk about what that means to really fill in that gap. But I think the next slide is a question slide. So we can go to the next slide.
Perfect. Thanks, Brian. I'll give you a moment to get some water. And we do have one question, and then we were going to do a waterfall round. So one question to answer is, are community-based solar panels part of the plan for outlying communities like Glacier, Washington?
Thanks for that question, Susan. So you're asking about some of the community solar. So we have a community solar program right now, and we look to expand that program and really try to understand what are the best locations, where are the best areas to build and to implement some of these solar facilities across Western Washington and some maybe in Eastern Washington as well. So yes, to answer your question, that is part of the plan and really understanding where the best places, locations, communities to place and expand our community solar program.
Thanks. Okay, and then while other questions are coming in, what we'll go ahead and do is a little bit of a waterfall round. So it's just a simple way to gather some input quickly from all of you at once. So here's how it's going to work. We're going to pose an open-ended question in the chat. And we're going to, it's a way to, we're going to go ahead and ask you to type your response in the chat, but please wait to press send. So I'll count to 3 and you can press send. And then once everyone has had a chance to think and type, we'll give the cue and just you'll hit send all at the same time. And we'll see a waterfall of responses coming in at once. So we're going to do this with 2 or 3 questions. And while I'm pausing, I'm going to take a moment to just remind folks to please go ahead and put your questions in the question and answer pod rather than the chat. It's rather difficult to follow them in the chat. So if you could go ahead and just pop them in the Q&A pod, that's super helpful. Even if you've already entered it in the chat, we're trying to transfer them over, but it's just helpful to reduce some of my multitasking and miss your question, which I definitely don't want to do. So let's go ahead and start this waterfall round. So the first question is, what matters most to you about clean energy planning? And we'll go ahead and put that in the chat. Okay, so it's what matters most to you about clean energy planning? I'll give you a moment to think about that. And again, don't press send yes yet, but we want to just see your responses come in all at once. Make sure when you're typing your response, you want to click the blue box above it to make sure you're selecting everyone so that everyone can see your response. Okay, so I'll count to 3 and we can press send. 1, 2, 3, go ahead and hit send and let's go ahead and see those come in. Okay, stopping global warming, sustainable and affordable. Yes, repeating the question, no problem. What matters most to you about clean energy planning? The environment, GHG reduction, climate change, an urgent switch to clean energy resources, curbing greenhouse gases, zero carbon, so many. Thank you all for doing that one. Okay. And while more of those come in, I'm going to go ahead and ask a second question, and we'll pop this into the chat as well so you can see it. Question number 2 is, what trade-offs do you think we need to consider when deciding which large-scale energy resources to use? I'll repeat that and we'll put it in the chat. What trade-offs do you think we need to consider when deciding which large-scale energy resources to use? Okay, 1, 2, 3, go. Go ahead and press enter. Thank you. Lots of responses coming in. Okay, so they're going pretty fast for me, but I see environmental, social, and health impacts, transmission costs, environmental risk, cultural, historical value, accessibility, the cheapest, safety and cost, environmental impact, safety, GHG reduction, is the resource clean, urgent switch to greenhouse gases, equity. Thank you, everyone. These are super helpful responses to see what matters most and what trade-offs you would consider. Okay, so one last question as those are still coming in, and thank you for continuing to type those. What would help your community feel supported or included if a large energy project like wind, solar, or storage were proposed nearby? We'll pop that in the chat so you can see it, and I'll repeat it. What would help your community feel supported or included if a large energy project like wind, solar, or storage were proposed nearby? I'll give you a moment to think about that. Okay, I'll count to 3 and go ahead and press send. 1, 2, 3, go ahead, press send. Okay, let's see those come in too. Okay, so legal commitments to addressing and mitigating the negative impacts on the community, more resources and information, proactive comprehensive tribal consultation before any decisions are made or even before the proposal is made public, tax benefits, community services, let's see. Oh, and thank you for that feedback, Rosemary, about the problem with questions, not having sufficient time to draft an accurate answer. I'll go ahead and copy all of them at the end of this, and you can feel free to answer anytime throughout today. And then community involvement and awareness with options to comment and converse, rebates and sharing profits with community. Great. So helpful. Okay, well, we really appreciate that. And yes, it is fast. That's why it's called a quick waterfall round. So thank you for that feedback. I'll go ahead and post the questions in here again, in case people want to continue responding to them. And then please go ahead and direct any questions you might have over to the Q&A, which I see we have cleaned up right now. So it doesn't look like we have any additional questions at the moment, Brian. So if you want to keep going, I think we're good to go.
Okay, sounds good, Annie.
Annie,
Thank you
Brian.
all. Oh, go ahead, Ray. I'm sorry.
Sorry, no, that's okay. We have one comment that kind of got lost in the chat, or question that got lost in the chat. And it says, what awareness raising or impactful programs are you managing for the population? If so, many challenges await future generations. So I think this, Brian, talking a little bit about customer awareness, engagement, outreach, et cetera.
Yeah, thanks for going back to that, Ray. I thank you, Amenta, for the question. This is a really critical part of what we do as a company. We have an entire organization who's devoted to some of the outreach and engagement efforts, and so we are diligent about reaching out to customers in specific areas across all the counties that we cover, across various customer segments, various diverse customer groups within our service territory as well. And so we will go to various community-based organizations. We will go to various events across our area to really understand, to really build some awareness, I should say, and to understand what are some of the burdens and barriers that customers are seeing out there. And so we have an entire team that's dedicated to that, and that is part of sort of the implementation aspect of how we move forward in this clean energy transition here. So hopefully that answers your questions, and I think we can provide more information as well later.
Great, thanks. And yeah, I saw a question in the chat. So to court, we're going to be addressing that topic in, I think, a few more slides. Okay. And then one more question that just came in from Rachel. Why is PSE focusing on flex program instead of TOU rates like Seattle City Light, PG, NE, and other utilities? What modeling do you have to suggest elective adoption will lead to effective peak shaving? What are your plans for commercial and industrial customers?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Rachel. We have a pilot, time of use rates pilot going on. It's not a full program yet. There's some information in our previous plans related to our time of use rates pilot. So it's not full-fledged yet, but that is a consideration. So we know that other companies are doing it. We know how effective that can be. So it is a part of the plan here. Um,
Brian, I'd like to just add too that the flex programming, we have some regulatory obligations to achieve certain benchmarks in terms of demand response. So it's not just PSE would like to do this. There are also regulatory reasons we're pursuing demand response programs.
yep, I would agree. Thanks, Ray.
Okay. So I think that gets us through the open questions now. Brian, if you want to keep us moving, I think we're good to go.
All right, let's keep going. I think this is the last section I've got here, and we really want to get back to, okay, we talked about the challenges, we talked about some of the mix where it stands today, and now let's get back to how does this tie into the integrated system plan? So we can go back to the next slide. When we met in November, maybe it was March, we talked a bit about that back to school shopping example where it was if you have all these different weather, that possible futures, if you will, how could you plan for or get the right set of clothing, pack the right suitcase, if you will? And this really parallels what we're trying to do in this integrated system plan is think about all these different possible futures, meaning a future where there's really high electrification, or futures where there's sort of moderate electrification, or futures where there's not as much. And so, as you think about those different futures, there's impacts when you have that sort of adjustment. So, when you have really high electrification, you've got um, really high gas load reduction. So your gas load is going to reduce, but that also means really high dollars in terms of the investments that you have to make to meet that level of electrification. And vice versa, when you have lower levels of electric load growth and lower levels of electrification, there may be less investments that are needed then as well. But what we're trying to do in this integrated system plan is really analyze each of those different scenarios and then try to develop a plan that is going to help to meet and mitigate most of the scenarios that you see here. Now, as we do that, again, that goes back to the different types of resources that we need to consider for each of these different scenarios. So if we can go to the next slide, this will be similar to the slide we saw earlier, but as we model and analyze each scenario, we have to be cognizant of how each of these buckets really fit into each of the different scenarios. So we need to understand what happens in a high electrification to the mix of baseload, peaking, and intermittent resources. What happens when we have lower electrification to these different resources as well. And so here, I can take some time here to really talk through what we're thinking about in our analysis in terms of the types of resources we're looking to study in each of these different buckets. Now, some of these, I think someone raised biodiesel earlier. I saw a question earlier about geothermal. So hopefully you all see some resources here that are top of mind for you all. But one of the things I want to call out is, again, with the base load, we need to retire out of coal that was mentioned earlier. So we know that that's going to be phased out. On natural gas, both for the baseload and peaking, we're thinking about, well, what other types of fuels can we convert to? We think that natural gas will be an important bridging fuel since there's really no other alternative technology in the market today. But we have to think about what are the fuels we can use between now into 2045 once we are fully out of the fossil fuel um, fossil fuel use, sorry. Um, and then other emerging technologies that we're thinking about are the enhanced geothermal, the nuclear, some of the storage and hydrogen as well. So those are all of the emerging technologies that we are mindful of, that we are studying. And many of these, the timeline is unsure, the costs are unsure, but we know that it's important that we have we have an understanding of what is possible as we make this transition out towards the future there. All right. So let's go to the next slide. All right. So now we get back to what I mentioned earlier, which is sort of uh, location, sort of geographic base of where are these different resources, because this is how we perform our model. We try to understand where where these resources going to be located. What does it take to get that energy from a Nevada, Montana, or Eastern Washington, even here in Western Washington? What does it take in terms of transmission, in terms of cost, to bring those resources home? And how do those resources interact when you have something somewhere as far away as Montana? How does it interact with the system? How does it meet that peak demand? How does it meet that baseload need across our system at various times throughout the year? So we have to think about, and we are modeling those different areas and those different options as we go through this integrated system plan process. All right, let's go to the next slide. As I mentioned, um, we're going to talk a lot about the customer side in October, but I wanted to just pull up a few of the different options that we're considering that we know on the customer side can really help power this clean energy future. We know it's not going to just all be some of the large scale resources that I've talked about throughout this presentation, but it is going to be an increase on the energy efficiency, the demand response, a lot of the DER, some of the solar and storage, residential and commercial side. And then even the vehicle to everything aspect, that is something we are mindful of and studying as well, because we know it will play a part. It may not be a huge part in comparison to the large scale resources, but we know that based on our current estimates, customer side could contribute as much as 10 to 15% of our growing need through these various customer side resources. Okay. So let's go to the next slide, and then I think we can wrap up. So when we try to determine the right mix of utility and customer resources at a high level, this is that process that we are trying to execute. And our first step is really to identify the requirements for the new resources. So we think about what is our need going to be in the next 20 years? What does policy, what does some of the legislation say about what is required? What do we need to serve our customers at the end of the day? Then that second step is to really develop a set of scenarios based on those possible futures. So thinking about, well, we could have a scenario where there's really high electrification. We could have another scenario that looks at something over here related to weather or something like that. But really thinking about building out the scenarios to help us perform the different analysis. Now, the third step is what we're doing right now, what we're in looking at deeply today, which is how are we finalizing the modeling assumptions? So we have to think about what are the assumptions we're going to make for the resources that are available. What are we going to make? What assumptions are we going to make about the costs? When are they going to be available? All of those inputs really feed into the modeling that we're going to execute on in the future here. And as you see that fourth step, that's when we start the modeling. That's when we let the computers churn and really optimize based on cost, based on resource, based on need, making sure that we continue to have a reliable system. The model rather optimizes for all those different inputs. Now, the fifth step is really to take in all those results, to iterate, to look at those, to look at the analysis, the output, and try to understand what is the best plan. And then the final step there is to really develop that plan overall. Okay, so 6 really high level steps to really bring us together into that final integrated system plan. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up here before we get to questions, but we had a refresher where we talked about what all the conversations we've had in the past about the scenarios and the integrated system plan and building that foundation. We talked about our mix of generation today, and we talked about some of the different resources we could use and are studying to really fill in the gaps for the different resources that we have today. And then we talked about sort of the steps we're going to take here and getting to that integrated system plan. But again, as we go through this integrated system plan, as we prepare for this clean energy transition, we continue to have safety and reliability top of mind for us. Okay. So I think I'll turn it to Annie to see if you've got any questions here.
Thanks, Brian. Okay. There's one question in the chat in the Q&A pod that we could get to next after you have a moment to drink some water. And then we do have a ranking poll that we're going to be sharing with all of you via a link. So if you all can be ready to click on that poll and open it and respond to it, we'll give you those instructions in a moment. And just one last reminder, please, if you're entering questions in the chat, please go ahead and copy and paste them over to the Q&A pod. It's really helpful so we can track chat separately with the Q&A. Okay, so question from Jack. Why can't enhanced geothermal be used for peaking?
Brian, you're muted, but I've been chatting with some of our colleagues and I can
Okay, thanks,
probably
Ray.
help with this one. The answer is that it primarily is planned to be used as a baseload resource. It doesn't ramp or turn up and down, so to speak, as easily as a gas resource or a battery. It could be used in some peaking cases though. So that chart, we probably should update that chart to note that some geothermal could potentially be used as peaking. So thanks for that feedback, Jack.
Great.
Thanks for that, Ray.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Okay, so now we'd love to just get your take on what matters most to you. So we're going to use that quick ranking poll that I just mentioned to hear from all of you. So you'll see a link pop up in the chat. It's going to take you to a Microsoft form where you can rank a list of priorities, from most to least important. So what you're going to do is you're just going to drag and drop the items in the order that feels right to you. There's no right or wrong answer. We're just looking for your honest perspective. It should only take a minute or two, and we'll show the results towards the end of the meeting that get submitted so we can make sure you see what is shared. And yeah, we just want to get your thoughts on this. And if you're having trouble with the link or form, just drop us a note in the chat and we'll go ahead and help you out. And when you open that link, just one quick reminder, when you open the link, you'll see items 1 through 7 on the question, and you can just drag them and let go with your mouse. If you haven't done that before, it's just real easy, just dragging them around in the order that you want. And then once you have them in that order, go ahead and press submit in the blue button at the bottom of the form. That's very important, or we aren't going to receive your opinion on this. So we'd love for you to take a moment to do that. That link is in the chat now. So we'll give you a few minutes to do that. Okay. And as those items are coming in, I'm not seeing other questions, so we can give folks another 30 seconds or so, but I can move us into what we're going to do for our wrap up with just a few things. And then if there are any remaining last questions, and once Emily, you have some results from the ranking poll, we can show those after I go through the next couple of slides.
Annie,
Yeah.
we have a well, I see someone says I have a question. If we are finishing Thomas Tolliver, please, Thomas, put it in the Q&A for us. And Aminta Rodriguez has a question, a comment/question. In the context of artificial intelligence, how do you think this tool could be used to improve not only awareness of energy use, but also directly in the development of consumer prices, costs, new technologies, and even to be prepared with a contingency plan to protect us in the future in the event of a global collapse due to excessive consumption, or even in a possible war scenario, which would effectively affect the entire global community? Brian, I think the answer here is we are looking at what AI can do for us. But we don't have a lot of information to share right now, but it's definitely something that PSC is thinking about.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, Ray. So thanks for that. Thanks for that question, Amanda.
Great. And as you get Thomas have a moment to put that in the chat, we'll come to it once I see it pop up. But I'll move us into the next slide. So that kind of gets us wrapped up through our main content today. So as I mentioned, we'll be sharing some results in a few moments. If you want to go to the next slide, Jack. So thank you all for following along and handling the technology with such care. And Jack, there you go. Okay. So we've talked a lot about a lot of clean energy things today, and it doesn't stop there. There's a lot of ways that you can stay connected and help shape Puget Sound Energy's clean energy plans going forward. You can join the email list to stay in the loop about future meetings and updates. You can visit the Integrated System Plan website to explore more about this process. You can participate in future webinars or the Resources Planning Advisory Group meetings as an observer. And most importantly, you can keep just sharing your ideas, questions, and feedback via all of these links. So Emily, my colleague, is going to be sharing those links in the chat for all of you if you'd like to join the email list or provide additional comments. And then it looks like we've got a few more questions that have come in. So from Thomas, Brian, if you're okay responding to this before we wrap up. We live on the Ring of Fire. We have lots of volcanoes. We shouldn't have to dig very deep to find hot rocks. Is that geothermal power?
Yeah, I'm gonna see if Chris can answer this. Chris, are you able to jump on? If not, I can provide a little color.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, Chris.
What was
Yeah, could you?
sorry, what was the question again?
Yeah, could you just talk a little more about what you're seeing in terms of geothermal? And I think Thomas had a question about, we've got a lot of volcanoes in the area. Can't we use that as geothermal power? But can you just provide what you've seen and done some research on about where geothermal sits today?
Yes, of course. So the big developments actually in geothermal are in what's called enhanced geothermal systems. There's right now a project in Nevada with Nevada Energy and a company called Fervo. And Fervo seems to be making some of the most headway when it comes to enhanced geothermal systems. But they basically are developing a technology where geothermal can actually be used at more broadly in locations that previously you couldn't access the geothermal energy reserves. So there's a lot of optimism around enhanced geothermal systems and a lot of progress that is being made by Fervo. Google is actually involved in that project. So that project is set to be COD actually in 2026. So the technology could potentially scale fairly quickly. That said, there hasn't been a ton of geothermal exploration for enhanced geothermal systems in Washington state. Now, to the question about, we've got these volcanoes essentially in Washington state. Can we leverage that? Well, there are some companies that are looking into leveraging some of the geothermal energy that we have. That said, you have to also be able to build a geothermal plant on such locations, which is certainly can be difficult if you can imagine. Not only just the geographic location itself, but also the siting and permitting. And then you also have to be able to build the transmission from those plants to where you need the electricity. So it's not as simple as what as you might think. That said, enhanced geothermal systems is something that we're definitely looking at as a company, and we're going to keep our eyes on it because there is a lot of optimism around it. And the key challenge, again, within Washington state is the exploration. You go to other states like Texas, for example, they've done a lot of mapping through the oil and gas industry around geothermal, but there hasn't been as much done in Washington state. So hopefully that answers the question.
Brian, you're on mute again.
It's like 5 years of this. I should know how to do this. Thanks for that, Chris. I want to ask about millimeter wave drilling. And Chris, if you can just quickly just touch on that if you know of that or can speak to that. If not, that's okay.
Yep, millimeter wave drilling. I can't really speak to that intelligently. We actually, my counterpart is actually kind of the most versed in geothermal.
Okay.
But if you do have a question on it, I'd be happy to take it back and we can get back to you.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks, Chris.
And Chris, how would that person get in contact with that question? Would just putting it in the feedback form be the best way?
I would suspect so.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got
sounds
the question, Annie. We'll follow up.
Okay, sounds great.
I appreciate the questions. Great questions. Thank you.
Great. Okay, and then I think there's one more from Francis. Does switching from gas to electric work in conjunction with adding more resources?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Francis. I think that's exactly what we're trying to study and understand, as we talked about some electrification where customers may switch over from gas to electric, and so it will have an impact on our electric demand. And so we have to think about what are the resources that we're going to bring in to help meet that sort of new demand, if you will, across our service territory as customers switch. So yes, that is definitely top of mind for us.
Great. Okay, well, I'm seeing us near towards the end of questions and also on time as well. And I know we've already encroached on your lunch hour, so we'll get us moving into next steps, if that works for folks. And just one more slide before I have us share the live results from the ranking poll. So if you want to go to that last slide, thank you. If you think of something later or want to follow up, here's how you reach PSE. So there's the isp@pse.com email address, or you can use the feedback form that's available on their website. And they also have the voicemail option, which we will pop this contact information in the chat so you have it at your fingertips. Just want to thank you all for that, for your questions and thoughtful chatting and answers back and forth. And so let's go ahead and share screen, Emily, with the results of the ranking poll before we close out for today.
Annie, there's one more question
Oh, okay, sure.
in the Q&A, please.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Okay, so one last question before we move into wrap up from Dawn. Is PSE taking into account the progress on iron air batteries, form energy that can store energy for months across seasons? This is really a game changer compared to batteries with shorter duration.
Thanks for that, Don. I'm going to see if Chris can jump in on this as well. I know we are looking and have been monitoring some of the iron air batteries from companies like Form Energy. So I know that is a part of some of the research and the work that the team is doing behind the scenes. But I don't know if
Sure.
Chris, you have any other?
I'll just say very quickly, because I know interest of time, but PSE has a memorandum of understanding with Form Energy to explore the use of their, what is a 100-hour long duration storage battery within the state. So we continue to explore potential locations for that. Though right now, we're kind of at a place where we're more, quite frankly, monitoring. Now, Form has a number of projects in other parts of the country where they should be reaching full commercialization of their technology in the not too distant future here. So generally speaking, when we're talking about emerging tech as a company, PSE is certainly exploring these technologies, but it cuts down risk if we can look to other projects throughout the country and see who's doing what, if a technology is going to be fully commercialized. Again, it cuts down a lot of risk before we make an investment in what can be a potentially more costly for these initial projects. But yes, long duration storage and particularly iron air and the Form Energy battery is something that we are continuing to look into and explore opportunities to potentially get a project going.
Thanks for responding to that,
Excellent.
Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
All right. Okay, so we're nearing the last minute or so. So Emily, if you could go ahead and share your screen with the ranking poll results that we completed earlier, that would be super helpful. And if people are already heading out, which I'm starting to see, just know that there's an end of meeting poll that will pop up on your screen, and completing that really helps us improve these for the future. So please feel free to fill that out.
I just wanted to confirm that folks can see my screen.
We can see it, Emily. Thank you.
Perfect. So it looks like the top priority for people was keeping energy reliable. Below that, we had cutting greenhouse emissions. In third place, we had adding more clean energy sources. Fourth is keeping cost affordable. Fifth is making sure customers stay safe. Sixth is offering more customer programs and support. And seventh was switching from gas to electric for heating and cooking.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks for turning those around so quickly. Super helpful to see. All right, we'll want to close us out for the day. Thank you all for joining us over your lunch hour during this beautiful, sunny, warm day. I know being in front of a computer is not always the easiest thing to do when you've got that tempting you outside. So thank you for being here. We appreciate all your thoughtful questions, comments. And if you have anything that you want to follow up with, feel free to use that feedback form or the email address for PSE. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.